course, yes. Hey everyone, welcome to our weekly get together. Let me share my now. Where that is. Okay, there it is. Okay, so okay. Today is the April 28th, and we are reading Monsters and Magical Sticks, continuing on week three of that. And by being here, you're giving me the permission to record you, and the recordings will be shared via YouTube on the level one groups. I'm a level four practitioner and I'm here as your host, where everyone's insights and examples and resources matter, and we are all growing together and sharing together. So let's get started. So, where we are on page 39 of Monsters and Magical Sticks. Hey, Carolyn, welcome. Um, so we're page 39. I can't, I won't. So who would like to start reading? Hey Miranda, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Doing good. We're just start getting started here.
Okay, awesome.
Eh, all right. And welcome.
Hello, how are you? Trying to find
Doing good.
all my things here. Let's see.
Perfect. Okay, we are on page 39 of Monsters and Magical Stick. So if you have the book, you can open up the page. And who would like to read?
I'd have,
We are on.
I'll read.
Okay, Randall, thank you. I can't, I won't.
Okay. I can't, I won't. If a man were to appear at your office suffering the following complaints: terminal cancer, his wife is run off with the milkman, his son is being tried for murder, and the bank has just foreclosed on his home, we might agree that his problems are reality problems. It would be fair to say that logical reality problems solving would be in order. Where can he go for treatment of his cancer? How can he go about getting the necessary legal advice? What steps does he need to consider and in what order? However, the average client or patient who appears at a clinician's office is not often suffering from such reality problems, nor are they in such dire straits. In all probability, the situation is not substantially different from that of a general cross section of people. Yet, these individuals may be anxious, depressed, or even acting psychotic. If we consider the possibility that their presenting problems are a result of some form of hypnotic transaction, then their problems are not based on logic or reality, much like the man at the party who ran because she looked at him in a funny way. To attempt to apply logical solutions to illogical and probably hypnotic problems is, in my opinion, illogical therapy. A man says to his therapist, I can't go out and meet women. Obviously, he has seen other men meet women. If the therapist says, come on, John, other men meet women, you have met women in your life, you really ought to try it. Um, that that therapist has goofed. John probably knows all of that and has no doubt heard that logical advice before. If the logic were the answer, he would have solved his problem, and he would be using his money for more enjoyable endeavors than therapy. How logical is it for an individual to raise their hand when a hypnotist pulls on his tie? Why not be illogical? Tell the man to go out and get rejected by at least 10 women, but to take careful notes as to his responses. Paul Watzlawick in 1978, in confronting the issue of logical versus more creative approaches, stated that then it also reveals the inappropriateness of a procedure, which essentially consists in translating this analogic language into the digital language of explanation, argument, analysis, confrontation, interpretation, and so forth, and which, through translation, repeats the mistake which made the sufferer seek help in the first place. Instead of learning the patient's right hemispheric hypnotic language and utilizing it as the royal road to therapeutic change. For those of you who would like more complete description of illogic methods and that work, may I recommend Dr. Zalowick's fine book, The Language of Change. I believe that hypnosis is the language of the right hemisphere and therefore a royal road to therapeutic change.
Randall, would you like to share anything on that? Any insights?
I have heard, I'm not sure where I picked it up, but one of the, actually it was probably from Richard Bandler's NLP work, but he talked about how most marriage therapists or some marriage therapists really screw things up badly because they invite the couple to face each other, look at each other and say, okay, I want you to tell your husband or tell your wife all the things that bother you. And then he tells the partner to sit there and receive it as best they possibly can. And what it does is it just reinforces the negative and all the things that they hate, instead of perhaps taking a different tact of, a suggestion like going back to the time where you first met each other and what was exciting and what did you feel and what did you notice about that, and so to bring the positives instead of more enhancing the negative.
Definitely. That totally makes sense. Yes. Anyone else would like to share anything?
Yeah, actually I would.
Mhm.
So I thought it was cool that you guys were doing this book, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much it has to do with this, but I think it does. So I finally found a program that was causing my, well, I mean, yeah, it was a full program, but like 50 years of it, that was causing my emotional eating and my inability to succeed the way that I wanted to. And it's just why I wanted to say something is I was watching one of Robert's videos last night, and it has so much to do with our responses to trauma, and of course, trauma is a hypnotic state, right? So, anyhow, that's why I just wanted to mention it, because it was like, sure, she knows me really well. I don't have a problem talking, but I really had a problem because I'll share with you guys, I was molested when I was 11. And so the way that I dealt with that was to bury it and to not talk. So when really bad things would happen, that's how I would respond. And I'm saying this because I think it would help for a therapist to actually figure out, because I went to therapy and I couldn't talk. I talked about everything else, but they couldn't figure out that I couldn't talk about Ryan and why I couldn't talk about Ryan and all that other stuff. So anyhow, I think it would be so beneficial if therapists would try and figure out, what's going on inside of them and what has happened to them rather than doing something like that.
Definitely.
Anyhow,
For sure. Thank you, Miranda.
yeah.
Certainly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just logical. We got to do a little illogical therapy.
Yes,
Anyone else? Hey,
absolutely.
Susan. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
if
you.
logic could fix the problem, we all have the prefrontal cortex and probably would have fixed the problem on our own.
Mhm.
So trying to solve a problem in the same way that we have stuffed it or created it is definitely not going to undo the problem. Doing more of the same program, basically.
Mhm. Yep.
Definitely. Yeah. And as Randall's example as well, like the couple have already been doing, like blaming and complaining to each other anyway. They don't need the therapist's help. So, so do something opposite, do something different. Mhm.
So
Yeah. Hey, Sherry.
A question. So that last sentence, that hypnosis is the language of the right hemisphere. Does it mean it's the language of the subconscious mind?
Yeah.
So the right
Also, yeah.
hemisphere,
So right hemisphere like things in pictures and images and the internal world of more like an artist.
right.
Right.
That's what I had heard before, but I hadn't really thought of that as the subconscious. So the left hemisphere is the logical, the numbers and that kind of thing. Okay.
Right. Perry Neal, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, regarding that right brain and that left brain, research had come out that said basically we are always combining those, that the right brain talks to the left brain, talks to the right brain, et cetera, because some of the previous research in the beginning said that they were completely separated. Right brain, you're a right brain person, you don't do anything over there. But the research said, nope, that was not really true. It's just kind of a combination. But that right hemisphere is for people who, or when you're using that, it's for being more creative and thinking differently than 2 + 2 is 4, et cetera, et cetera. 2 + 2 might be 4 because it could look like this or whatever. Okay, that's enough. Sorry.
Yeah, because everybody's creative. We can fall into belief systems. I mean, I literally said that. I was working with choir and I was in that other place a lot, but I literally said that I wasn't creative, and now I'm writing children's books and lyrics and all kinds of other stuff.
Definitely. So Sherry, does that somehow
Yeah.
answer your question? So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. I guess
So
I'm
how
just
I,
put the subconscious in a box, and I probably shouldn't do that.
right, I don't think he's talking about the subconscious mind being the right brain, but I think what he's talking about that logically from the left brain you cannot solve a problem, but you have to get into the creative mind. Like,
Okay.
how can you be creative and solve? So hypnosis is a language of the right brain, as in like you creatively solve the problem instead of being logical about it.
Okay. That helps because I had a very narrow definition on hypnosis. Oh, subconscious. I had linked those two.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? Anything else? Any questions? Any insights, examples?
I do have a question real
Julia?
quick. Yes,
Yes.
hi everybody. So I just joined now. Which book are we talking about?
We're reading Monsters and Magical Sticks, and
Okay,
we are starting on the page 41, Svengali and Trilby.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, I heard Robert talk about this book for a while now, but I didn't know you guys were exploring that book. Thank you very much.
Yeah, today's week 3rd, so perfect timing.
Okay,
And
great.
you'll find the replays on the level 1 group. So if you would like, you can catch up on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, so who would like to read the next section, page 41? Gary, please. Thank you.
Okay, then I can check I've done it. Okay. Svengali and Trilby. If we begin to realize that words and other forms of communication may cause an individual to turn inward and create a hallucinated world to which the individual responds, we have broadened our concept of hypnosis itself. If that hallucinated world is one in which choices are reduced or excluded, and the individual is conditioned to respond in set ways, we would also have a better understanding of hypnotic suggestion and phenomena. Of course, there will be those that say that can't be hypnosis. The person was not in a trance. No one was wearing a cape. No one used a crystal ball. A question for you, the reader, is just when did Svengali and Trilby live? For those of you who are not sure, we can limit the time frame to between this day sometime in the past. Okay, give up. In reality, Svengali and Trilby never lived. They were the product of a novelist's imagination. Yet, there are many people who've been hypnotized into believing that they were real. But of course, lest we forget, there's no such thing as hypnosis, or perhaps it's all hypnosis. I would like to bring back our metaphoric friend, the stage hypnotist. When we left him, he was giving his subject the following suggestion. When I pull on my tie once, you will raise your left hand. When I pull on it twice, you will lower your hand. Now, where that suggestion is accepted by the subject, we can expect that he will respond as requested. If the signal is given often enough, the poor subject will develop a conditioned response. Those who've been trained in traditional hypnotic phenomena will recognize the following. Each time the signal is given, the subject will respond in a set, stereotyped sequence of steps. Each individual's responses may be different from that of another, but each will respond in a set, almost compulsive fashion. Now, what I have trouble understanding is this. How does the hypnotic subject's stereotypical responses differ from that of so-called neurotic responses? The neurotic, upon certain conditions, signals or cues, tends to respond in a set, stereotyped, compulsive way. What, pray tell, is the difference? Finito.
Would you like to share anything on that, Sherry?
Well, Svengali and Trilby never lived. I don't know. I think it's fascinating to think how our minds can work, and that there's people who train for that to have these set things. And I, of course, am similar to that person because they're not wearing a cape or a crystal ball, and I'm not in the show, that it's hard to believe. And even when I've seen that, it's like, yeah, whatever. This is just all an act. But I do believe that I mean, this is interesting to me that it can be possible, because we have these hypnotic trances that we go into. I mean, I know when, you're doing sessions, well, I don't do them, but when I'm in one, that you do go into that kind of trance. And then until your practitioner goes, come back, all the little phrases that they use, then you really are like, wait, where am I? So I do believe that we can get into that. And so that's all I have to say. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Anyone else? Hey, Miranda.
Okay, so I think this is interesting because I worked for a little while in a home that had people that they call them mentally disabled. And so there were some people that were diagnosed with what's the name of it? Like psychosis and things like that. And, just I hadn't really, I think I thought about it a little bit when I first started studying this, but it's kind of one of those things. I think new neural pathways are being built and it's like dropping in more. I think if those people were trained in a positive way, like you were saying, Shirsti, to focus on positive things instead of, like calling it a neurotics response, that they could do a lot better. Because if they're trained on focusing on the neurotic response, or I don't think there's really any difference between the two. It's just how they're calling it, what they're naming it. But I think if they were worked on and they were allowed to let that stuff go and focus more on positive trances and things like that, that they could thrive a lot more.
Definitely. Yeah, by that definition, I have been pretty neurotic for most of my life because my mom did not train me to focus on the positive. But just saying, focus on the negative, focus on, what's everything bad around, So, and that way we get trained, we are in that hypnotic trance of looking for bad, how everyone is, against us and this and that. But now we're changing and stepping into a different hypnotic trance of looking for the good and finding that good inside of us, how I can create the goodness within without it having to come from the outside. And so we're stepping from this one trance to the other trance. And so, yeah, thanks, Miranda.
We're going to create, and just the same thing like we were talking about the therapist focusing on the negative of what was bothering them. If that's what they focus on, that's what they're going to create.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes. Anyone else would like to share anything or discuss any part of this section? Sasha, we're just finishing up this chapter. We're on page 41, discussing the last section. Um, okay, Carolyn, see you next time. Thanks for being here. All right. Anyone else like to share anything else on that? I like these sentences. Hey, Torian.
Hi.
Hey, good to see you.
Hi. Just I guess this is just like from my past thing. Because worked with therapists that just focus on the negative, and I've worked on therapists that just focus on the positive. And let me tell you, this program way better than therapy, way better. But I would say the therapists that just, in my opinion, of course, the ones that just focus on the positive, it just felt super fake. Like it was just like, okay, well, you have X, Y, and Z going on. Well, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on all these other things. But you're just like, well, X, Y, and Z are still there. It's like you can't just be like, hey, so I'm just making this up. My boyfriend beats me. Well, let's focus on going on the water park. It'd be like I've actually had therapists like do that, and it was just like frustrating as hell as the person being like, but can we work on it? That's the reason I came in. But I feel like if they like mixing the two is like the therapist I found the best. Again, this is way better, but like out of all the year because I've been in therapy since I was 7, so a lot of different therapists. um but I thought that was interesting. It was just I think there needs to be a good balance if someone's going to go to therapy. I'd suggest anything else at this point, but that was just my experience. I thought it was interesting.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. And if they're mixing up the two, that means they're going from one to the other and they're scratching up the old record of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely. That's definitely very cool. Anyone else? Anything you like to share? If not, we can go to the new chapter 4, Forget It. Who would like to read? Hey, Torian?
Awesome. And it's Amnesia Remembered, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Before it's forgotten completely, I would like to bring up the subject of amnesia and its relationship to the subject of this book. Freud defined amnesia as the repression of traumatic material that the ego, I might call it the conscious mind, is not capable of handling. If we accept the definition as accurate, it would be safe to assume that the traumatic information is still there, but the individual has no conscious awareness of the trauma. If the trauma is still there, then in all probability the effect and the consequences are still active. However, due to the amnesia, the individual will experience unpleasant feelings without knowing their source. Since people do not like not knowing, they may find something in their external reality to blame. That thing may be totally unrelated, symbolic, or it could contain a feature that reminds the individual unconsciously of the original trauma. The individual may then react with some psychologists term the as if effect, responding to a current situation responses and feelings as if they were responding to a past situation. Several years ago, while doing research on hypnosis, a professor of psychology introduced this. I don't know how to say that word.
Somnambulistic.
Okay, I was like, I've never seen that word before in my life. Um, in a trance, the subject was capable of the most profound hypnotic phenomena, including post-hypnotic amnesia. The thrust of this research was to test the theory that upon carrying out the post-hypnotic suggestion, the subject would re-enter the hypnotic state. While in the somnambulistic state, The, the subject was told that when a clock chimed 10 p.m. at the evening's faculty party, she would remove one of her shoes, place it on the dining room table, and put roses into the shoe. Further, it was suggested that she would have no memory of the suggestion. It would appear to be her own idea, and that she would feel compelled to finish the task. A very interesting thing happened on the way to the forum. While she was carrying out the hypnotic suggestion, the professor asked what she was doing. She replied that her husband had given her a beautiful crystal vase that looked just like her shoe, and she had never known what to do with it. She went on to state that she had suddenly dawned on her and how to arrange the flowers in the vase, and she had to try it before she forgot or try it in her shoe before she forgot. While her explanation appears to be absurd, she acted as if she believed what she was telling the truth. As the professor tried to explain to her how ridiculous her story was, she became anxious, agitated, and defensive. The experiment was terminated during her extreme anxiety and discomfort. Now we examine the preceding example objectively. We can see a case of post-hypnotic suggestion being carried out without any conscious awareness of the suggestion source. Further, it shows how desperately the subject searched for a logical explanation of her actions and shows the emotional upheaval produced when the subject's explanation was challenged. You might say, so what? She was just carrying out a hypnotic state. But I believe this is hypnotic phenomena is created in all our lives more often than we would believe. Take a man who walked into a party and saw the woman looking at him in a strange way and responded with a rapid heartbeat, knots in his stomach, saying to himself, I know why she's looking at me. She hates me. If someone were to challenge that his interpretation, he would probably defend it and become irrational. But of course, there's no such thing as hypnosis. If my thesis is correct, then the man's response makes it much more sense as the woman did with the shoe. Attempting to make sense of his action and responses will be tedious and probably accomplish very little or less.
Thanks, Torian. Do you have any insight on that? Anything you'd like to share?
No, I think it makes sense.
It's very interesting.
I've been working with Nicola for a really long time on like unblocked memories because I'm depressed. I have depression and everything, but like there's a lot of things that like trigger me that I've literally never been able to like pinpoint, but now like that I'm unlocking some memories, it's like making sense, and I'm like, oh, that's the reason that bugs the crap out of me, or that's the reason I feel like I want to throw up when that happens. Okay, and it's not about like it's not, you're not getting rid of it necessarily. It's just more of a like you're working on it, you're like recognizing it and then tapping it down and obviously and everything. But like it's just like before it's fully tapped down, it made me feel, because there's some of them we're still working on obviously. But even though now that I can see it in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. This makes sense. Why your brain's going like, oh, you see a pretty bird. I'm depressed. Like, you're just like, but this makes a lot of sense, I think. Because, like, once you, like, understand why you're doing something, it, like, makes it calmer. But if someone questions why you're doing something and you're not 100% sure, you're sure as hell gonna bite their head off.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
And you're reprogramming yourself, right? You're reprogramming yourself. That's why UTAP Faster EFT works, because like me doing this 5 years, I could never go back to who I used to be because I'm totally reprogrammed. So yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else would like to share anything on that? Hey, Sherry?
Yeah, it made me think how as children for the first 6, 7 years, we're in a hypnotic state. And we take some things that are just as absurd as arranging roses in a shoe and operating on that for the rest of our life and thinking that, it's logical and probably everybody does this, but it's not. So that kind of helps think, okay, what programming did I receive those first 6, 7 years? And as I go into memories, it kind of puts a new depth to that, because sometimes I have trouble letting go. Oh, it's not right. It's not right, because it was so deeply programmed in me. I'm just like the lady that she got anxious when she was confronted, you shouldn't put flowers in the shoe. No, but to her, that, because of the hypnosis, it was just perfectly logical. So what things in my life am I carrying from those first 6 years that are just seem logical to me, but they're just as logical as putting roses in a shoe instead of a vase?
Absolutely.
And
Yes, definitely. And also, where it says that even when we have no conscious awareness of the trauma is still there, and we feel like Robert says, that memories could just be kinesthetic. We have these feelings come up and sensations, but we don't not seeing anything. We don't remember, but
Yeah.
our unconscious mind is showing us some signs of it. We just feel certain things. We just have these programs come up and show up. And we have these belief systems come up, but they're all part of this trauma or a memory, or how we just learn to live life, and then we're reacting from that same hypnotic trance. Yeah. Hey, Susan.
Yeah, it's interesting how she doubled down on her behavior, just like we do when we're triggered by somebody. And so this experience with her and the flowers, this woman in the flowers, brings up another question for me, is that hypnotic trance, and was someone trying to explain to her, no, that you were hypnotized, or how do you reverse engineer this? How do you bring her back out of it and say, no, no, this is something that you were hypnotized to do? Would that have to be a reverse hypnosis, or tap it out? It's like it
Probably.
installed. Now, how do we uninstall it? How do we pull that out? I mean,
You
just
take
like our programs where we double down to defend our behavior.
Yes. Right. Definitely. Yeah. We do double down to defend our behavior, right? And sometimes we are like so adamant about like, this is the right way to do it, or somebody else's behavior is wrong, or not justifiable, or not moral. And all that is just hypnosis as well, right? So poor lady, she would have to have, you know, reverse hypnosis to get her out of that trance of arranging her flowers in the shoes. Yes. Hey, Miranda.
so what you would do, you take them back to the beginning of the program when the program got installed too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which you learn on level 2. Yeah.
definitely. You take them back to the beginning of the program, and yeah, or also just anyhow, however she knows that she's doing it, just scratch that record. Tammy, welcome. We are
Thanks.
on, hey, we are on page 43 of Monsters and Magical Sticks, and we're just discussing this last section, Amnesia Remembered. Yeah, anyone else would like to share anything on that? Yeah, we'll have to show her that her trance was just a trance and untrance her. Um, Anyone else? If not, we can read case number 2, fears of height. Who would like to read? Miranda, please. Thank you.
Fear of heights, an example of one hypnotic technique I use along with a partial case history should illustrate how the above fits together. A woman in her 50s had a terrifying fear of heights. She knew it was because she had fallen off a 5-foot ladder at about 8 years old. I told her if the ladder was the cause, then anyone who fell off something 5 feet high would have the same fear she had. I asked her to close her eyes and see herself climbing a ladder until she felt all the fear and to signal with the first finger of her left hand when she was in touch with that fear. I observed her facial expression, breathing rate, and general appearance as she evidenced a state of fear. It touched her right arm lightly. Oh, I touched her arm lightly and said in a slow, even tone, hold on to that feeling and remember when I touch you, you can experience the fear immediately. I then snapped my fingers and said in a faster pace, replace that picture with one of beautiful flowers. Smell them and feel the pleasure. I observed the changes until she appeared calm and relaxed. I then told her that when I touched her arm, she would feel the fear, and as if watching a slide projector, she would see scenes clearly, going back to the source of that fear and to signal when there. When she signaled, I told her to let go of the uncomfortable feeling as I snapped my fingers and to watch as if seeing someone else until she saw and or heard something that connected for her and that she would return to conscious awareness until that connection was made. After approximately 5 minutes, she opened her eyes and told the following story. When she was about 5, she had a friend who used to climb on boxes and jump off. Her mother caught her one day and told her that one day she was going to break a leg and it would serve her right. Her mother also said that would be a good thing because otherwise she would fall off something high and kill herself. Oh my gosh. That was a powerful hypnotic suggestion planted beautifully. When she fell off the ladder, it was the same as shining a red light and having the subject raise a hand. From that point on, in her mind, the next fall would kill her, and she had no memory of the suggestion. She then protected herself by developing a phobic reaction to heights. If she avoided heights, she wouldn't die. None of this makes sense except in her mind. There, it was real. The resolution of the problem was accomplished by having her close her eyes and see herself as an army demolition expert. I then touched her arm and told her to see all those fears as time bombs and safely blow them all up. That she would then feel the pleasure of the flower and see herself in the garden and to signal when she completed the task. When she signaled, I told her that she would arouse herself, bringing back those good feelings. With that, I snapped my fingers to remind her all those good feelings. Now, having someone blowing up time bombs doesn't make any more sense than the original hypnotic trauma, except it works. I have observed people evidencing severe anxiety and then a deep sigh of relief when they have finished. Later, many have told me that they were less afraid in general and were responding more comfortably to what they had been their problem area. If we again grasp the concept that the problem is really a metaphor, then blowing up the time bombs is simply the right tool for the right job, metaphorically speaking.
You, Miranda. So tell us, what did you get out of it?
I wanted to read it because Tammy just popped in, and when we were in Vegas in training, we decided to go zip lining, and I decided not to tap on my fear of heights. So I didn't enjoy my zip lining as much as Sarah, who had Tammy's daughter, Priella, a 9-year-old at the time, work on her. Although I did have my fear of mice worked on. It really, really works. So I encourage you to do this because you don't need to hang on to that stuff. You can enjoy life more. So it's true. I mean, it's like like the book keeps reiterating the fact that these suggestions, the things that are happening with the person don't make logic sense, but that's because of the hypnotic suggestions that have been put in the mind that she didn't realize that she bought into. And you get to change.
Definitely.
Yeah, you get to change it.
Yes. And I also noticed a lot of good bad collapse here, bad good collapse.
Mhm.
That was very cool.
Yes.
Tammy?
And I find it interesting. I was reading it over and over because he's so good with words. And the first he says, hold on to that feeling. So somehow he identified that she's speaking in feeling language. And then he says, and remember when I touch you, you can experience the fear immediately. And then snapped his fingers and said, replace that picture. So first he called it a fear, a feeling. And then he said, replace that picture, which is visual representation of it, which we know she has because, well, I don't know if he knew that right away when she said it.
Mhm.
She knew it because she had fallen off a ladder.
Well,
So
so that would,
how does he know that it's a picture even? I don't know, but he's just masterful at it. And then he says, you'll see, you'll replace it with a picture of beautiful flowers, smell
So the
them, and
first,
feel the
right.
pleasure.
Sorry to interrupt. The first sentence, I asked her to close her eyes and see herself climbing a ladder until she felt the fear. So there's
Oh,
kinesthetic as well as the picture.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
cool.
that's why
Thanks for
he put the
noticing that.
feeling with the
Yeah.
seeing. And then later, when he did the same thing, I told her to see all those fears. Well, before he was telling her to feel it, I don't know, like, how do we do that so quickly? To be like, go
It's
hold
so
that
smooth.
feeling and now see it better, and then then see all those fears as time bombs. So I know that this book is all about the different representations our mind holds, and like the one that's blocked or the one that um when we have memories we can see it or hear it but then not feel it, or we have memories we can only feel but we have no idea, we can't see them or hear them. So that's interesting.
So I really like how he changed the visual. He's like changing them from visual to kinesthetic, like then see all the fears. Like how do you see the fears? But he's jumbling them up, like seeing the fears and feel, hold on to that feeling and then see. And then
Yeah,
there's a lot of anchoring going on,
mhm. Yeah.
right? So he hold on to that fear, but he touches it. So that him touching her is anchoring that fear so he can bring it back again,
Mhm.
right? And then he snaps the finger and takes her to the visual representation of flowers. That's very cool.
so does the right arm hold any significance, do you think? Because he'll say I touched their shoulder, I touched their right arm, or like he'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. I don't remember reading and like then he touched the left arm for anything, but I guess he just maybe said like, he just touched the right arm to anchor that fear so he can bring that back. And then he just replaced it with flowers and he replaced
After the
it with
snap.
the snap. And then it's taking the pictures, turn them into time bombs. And then the feeling to pictures, then the time bomb blew it up, and then so her brain is all scrambled up. It's just, like mine
I'm
is
so
how to,
confused.
I
And it's
know.
interesting that he touches her arm when he's thinking, when he has her feel something, which kind of represents the tapping that, we put them in a feeling and then we say, we give them a physical sensation along with that too. So
It wouldn't be a bad idea to read this again, actually.
exactly, there's a lot in it. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
the
really
scene
good.
from The Waiter. I went back and read that several times. I'm like, oh, because it's kind of like you pick up little pieces the more you read it. So
Mhm.
Absolutely. Anyone else has any insights on that? Hey, Susan.
Okay, the manual for the mind goes into that a little more deeply. So with the, as you were saying, the confusion that happens, I think also creates kind of a trance state, and then beginning with their primary, whether it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and then leading into another one, and then all that those other ones coming in kind of, as Tammy said, scrambles the brain, kind of a hypnotic state. And then with the touching on one place, for the good feeling, you can also anchor the bad feeling in another place. But the manual for the mind really goes into that much more deeply. I've been reading that along with this, so it's really interesting and cool.
Sounds good. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, yeah, I'll read that book. One day I'll get that. Maybe the next one we can start on that. Anyone else? Any other fun insights on that? It's really cool. All right. If not, then we can go on to the next section, rocket launching. Who would like to read? You, Sasha?
Hi. All right. If you were to witness the launching of a guided missile, you might be put into a state of awe. You could appreciate the power and sophistication without understanding any of the intricacies. Unless you were an expert in the field, you might consider the missile as a vehicle that requires a guidance system and a triggering device. To relate this missile metaphor to our subject, you might consider a past hypnotic-like suggestion as the guidance system, directing behavior, the vehicle, towards a target, and the triggering device as the specific stimulus that triggers the hypnotic suggestion. However, for the vessel to be propelled, it must have fuel, and in our metaphor, fear is the fuel that keeps the system going. Underneath all so-called problems lies that fuel called fear. Fear of rejection, fear of dying, fear of falling, fear of not being good enough. Whatever you tag it, it still comes out fear. Fear is what makes the field fertile for the planting of hypnotic suggestions, which result in behavior labeled by some psychiatrists and psychologists as neurotic, psychotic, paranoid, manic depressive, and in rare cases, normal. There was a case reported some years back of a young woman who couldn't say no. She was labeled nymphomaniac. Hypnosis revealed that, as a child, she was expected to obey without question. Her mother would fly into rages if she didn't. One day, she said no to her mother. Her mother beat her, and she fell back into a stove and was burned by hot water, while her mother screamed, "Don't you ever say no." As a young woman, whenever a man asked her for sex, she would always say yes, without even knowing why. The fear of saying no was so great, she carried out the hypnotic suggestion by saying yes. Remember the young man who, every time he gets close to being better than his father, blows it up, getting himself fired? He too was responding due to his fear and the suggestion of the past. The cast of characters is different, but the story and the monster called fear is the same. Fear doesn't have to be rational to affect us powerfully. If you ever had someone pull an April Fool's joke that you believed and responded to, or if you have awakened at night hearing creaking in the house and found yourself responding with fear, etc., then you know fear needn't be rational. Fear has been known to block the effects of Novocaine in the dental patient. Surgeons are aware that a severely fearful patient is a ripe candidate to require more anesthesia, to die on the table, or to take much longer to recover. Put this emotion, which causes so many physical and mental responses, together with the post-hypnotic suggestion, such as "don't be better than your father," and you have a potent combination that needn't make sense to affect the person's life in painful ways.
So cool. Would you like to share anything on that, Sasha?
Well, the whole Novocaine thing was a little scary since I'm gonna have surgery at some point. But, I think it's interesting because again, last year I was like really sick, and one of the things that I remember from that experience is I don't ever remember being that fearful. And I always want, like, I've been a little bit neurotic. I think because I saw Woody Allen reruns, and he's very neurotic, so bad suggestion for me. But it was never like a huge issue, like fear and stuff like that. And so it's interesting reading this that I can understand perhaps why it got so bad because of the intense sense of fear that I had gone through. And it took a while to create a sense of safety to get myself out of that. And so this was very enlightening to the past situation for me for sure.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Sasha. Yeah.
And
And I
you know,
also, yeah. Yes.
because you said you were concerned about going in for the surgery, do you know how to let go of the fear of that?
I'm working on it. I'm working with what is it? Stacy. And so she just started level 4. But I do tap on the regular. But it was just like right now I read that and I was like, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Right.
there was the whole protocol to easily work through that. So no
Okay.
problem.
Is it in level 1?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
It's actually in classes too. It's the big, what is it, Tammy? The big
Sabi.
faith approach issue Sabi. Yeah.
Sabi. Okay. I'll look for it. Thank you.
For fears. Yep.
I think it's the user manual for the brain. Hey, Sherry.
Okay, so I don't know what's wrong with me because I don't have any fear of anything. And so I feel like, well, I'm just weird. Um, I try to have fear, but then I giggle and I don't. So I just don't.
Good thing.
And I think, well, I'm just not normal. I should be having these problems. But I don't. So does that mean I can't play anymore with level 1? I don't just no, I really don't have any fear of anything. And so for me, I've because I've had, I have kids and grandkids, and a lot of them have these fears. And of course, I'm fearless going, anyway, and I probably have created children that are in deep psychiatric treatment right now. I don't know, but I don't know. I can understand how it would be something that would be hard. I mean, my sister almost died last year from a heart attack, and she has a great fear. She has a pacemaker now, and she has a great fear. She won't travel anywhere. She's just so fearful that somehow, I'm like, come to Italy with me. And she's like, I can't get on a plane, and I just thought, wow. And I feel bad for her, but that's her fear and she's not going to do it. And if I were to bring up tapping and all of these things, she would, yes, I would be quite ridiculed. So whatever. Anyway, I'm sorry I said anything. I'm gonna sign that.
No, thank you for sharing, Sherry, for sure. And you just don't have the hypnotic trance of being in the fear, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Anyone else would like to share anything? I really like the phrase that fear does not need to be rational. It's very interesting. Right. We have a few more minutes. Unless anybody has anything to share, we can go on the next section. And who would like to read? Yes. Carrie.
There we go. Putting the pieces together, there was a woman who had been institutionalized on 3 separate occasions. Her history was very interesting. As a little girl, she had watched her mother go crazy and had seen her taken away. Her father would get drunk and yell at her. You're just like her. That's a pretty strong suggestion. And of course, fear is already there. So she ends up being institutionalized and dubbed crazy, and there's no such thing as hypnosis. There is very little difference between the above case and the dynamics of the subject raising his hand at a red light or at the pull of a tie. Remember the woman with the shoe? She became fearful when questioned and then irrational. The more fearful she became, the more irrationally she tried to find a logical reason and defend her behavior. If for some reason the sequence were repeated several times, she could develop a conditioned reflex. She might go around trying different arrangements in different shoes. She repeats her behavior to prove she wasn't crazy the first time. I believe that all learning follows the principles of hypnosis, or that all hypnosis follows the principles of learning. You will have to decide for yourself. A child's first experience of reading is through suggestion. For example, the child is shown a picture of a cat, and she sees the letters C-A-T, and the teacher repeats, C-A-T spells cat. See the picture? Sooner or later, the child takes a suggestion. It would be just as easy to teach the child that F-Y-Z spells cat. The fear of not belonging, the authority of the teacher, and the repetition of suggestion all combine to produce learning. I am not for a moment forgetting positive reinforcement in learning. Complimenting the child in his good spelling is important. So is telling the child that children should be seen and not heard. And then complimenting the child for being so quiet. Of course, in the later example, the child might grow up shy and withdrawn, but the principle remains the same. Yeah, that's a pretty good connection there. It's just, goes back to that childhood learning. Whatever is programmed into us, that's what we believe and start living out. And until we come to some kind of, wait a minute, this isn't working. I'm depressed. I'm miserable. I can't this, I can't that. We're not going to confront it. We're just going to keep on. I guess that's what we do. We just live whatever was programmed, whether in childhood or later on. We're just programmed people. And I guess that's the beauty of Faster EFT. We're learning to deprogram ourselves and put something more
Definitely.
useful in.
Yeah. Thanks, Sherry. Anyone else would like to share anything? Jamie?
I found this a lot in myself when he said she repeats her behavior to prove she wasn't crazy the first time. Like, do you ever find yourself like, I'm gonna prove this? And then if you could just like step back a bit and look at that, you'd be like, I don't have to prove that, but it's so funny that we'll repeat behaviors to prove something that nobody else actually believes about us. So that we just look like we're out. Like we don't believe it ourselves, right? So that's funny.
Definitely. I know. Certainly. Yeah. I also like that first example of her being taken away because mom was institutionalized and dad told her that, oh, you're just like your mom and she's institutionalized. And you wonder how many diseases are genetic or whatever because we just watched. And so Robert says just to clean up how you watched people, your parents, die or have diseases because that's just a program and it's going to repeat itself. So just clean that up as well.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Hey, Miranda.
I want to say, clean it up, but also reprogram it to what it is that you want.
Absolutely.
Because program, I didn't do that as much as I wanted to, and I didn't understand why. But yeah, you got to reprogram yourself to what it is that you want instead.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because just cleaning it up, and then it leaves an empty space and the brains can just fill it up with the familiar. And so that's why we change the memories. We're not changing our past, we're changing it to what we want in our future.
Yes. And
Yeah.
rewiring yourself and creating new neural networks. Because
Yeah.
like when you create it, like if you're saying, I don't know all the time, or whatever it is that you're doing all the time, it makes it so easy to slip into that, right? But once you start creating a new one, even if it's small, the more and more that you do it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's why it's so important to visualize. I couldn't, when I started visualizing like 8 months ago, I have always wanted to live in a house because I've never gotten to own a house. It was a manufactured home or an apartment, right? So, but I couldn't get my brain to be able to visualize living in a house. I could only get it to me living in a condo. But the more and more that I did visualize me being in a different space, what it is that I wanted, and knowing in my heart I wanted a house, and eventually I was able to start visualizing a house. And now I visualize all the time me living in a house. So yeah, it's amazing how well it works if you keep doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and visualizing mom and dad living in a house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Definitely.
that
Yeah,
too. Change that
for
too.
sure. Because, sometimes we don't give ourselves the permission to visualize something that's better for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share anything on that? All right. No, thank you. It was really awesome. And the time goes so fast. So I will see you guys next week, and we will start on belief systems.
Awesome.
Next
Thank
chapter.
you.
You guys have a good week. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much for being here. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.